Hey guys, Nick here, and welcome to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 6 to What If Frieza Turned Good. Before we get into today's part, be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the Omniverse, and further acknowledge and support the future of the Omniverse by checking out the Discord, Patreon, and Google Doc on the homepage, as well as commenting future requests and what if suggestions in the comments section down below. With all that said, let's begin today's part. We ended off last time with Cell, still part of this story, and with all the huge powers, and especially Vegeta and Goku's flare up with 2, and then all of what's happened, Cell is on track to the laboratory without any of the Z fighters knowing. And since Bulma's discovered the location of the lab, that means Trunks is going to be the main one to get rid of the androids, since they don't have a chance to be, brought into the living world. So, today we see who gets there first and what happens in this part. The Z fighters eventually approach the lab and find it, and with no interruptions. Trunks instantly is furious. He remembers Gohan, who fought and lost his arm and fought his hardest against the androids and what they did to him, and then the day he died. And remembers Vegeta, who died way sooner, and to just one android, number 17. But this Vegeta kept his arms. But Gohan, Vegeta, all of that flares into one categorical emotion for Trunks. Pure rage. And he flares up the anger inside and bursts into Super Saiyan. But this Trunks, yes, he hasn't trained in the time chamber yet, but this Trunks is so angry by the revelation that Vegeta's almost died and the location of the lab in 1718 not being awakened yet. All of those emotions flare to Trunks right on the cusp of grade 2, just like Goku was back when they were fighting King Cold. Trunks is flared to that level because of his anger, and with no hesitation goes for a Buster Cannon straight at the lab right then and there. But no one expects what happens after he shoots that Buster Cannon. The Buster Cannon is blown and completely deflected with a special beam cannon? And they look and see, that wasn't Piccolo. He wouldn't do this. That special beam cannon stopped him from shooting the lab, but it wasn't Piccolo, and it wasn't Frieza. And Frieza doesn't know the special beam cannon, no one else does. And then, before they even get a chance to figure it out, they see a very, very short glimpse of who might have done it, but just for a split second, and it's Cell that he has gotten to the lab just now and is securing his goal. And with no explanation, right when they see him, he solar flares them all, flies straight into the lab, opens the pods with 17 and 18, and he absorbs them. And he walks out of the lab smiling and in his perfect form. And Frieza is completely shocked along with everybody else as to not only the identity of this bug creature, but that he is just changed from the small little glimpse of who they just saw. And that he looks different, and they're guessing all at the same time that he must have done something and absorbed the other androids that they actually were told about. What else could have happened to make him look different like that? If he had transformed, he would have done so right then and there, but he walked out of the lab. So clearly he moved directions, and that circulates back to the fact, oh, he must have absorbed the other androids. And they don't even know who he is or why he did it or what he's doing here. But Trunks immediately just goes serious, grabs his blade, and is now in grade 2 fully and just doesn't care. And he rushes to attack Perfect Cell. But if it wasn't plainly obvious, with no time chamber, Trunks is thrown into a wasteland part near the lab with literally just a single attack. And Cell introduces himself and says that he is Dr. Gero's ultimate creation. And it's all thanks to Trunks and everybody here that he was able to gain his perfect form. He then goes on to explain that it's because of Trunks he's even here in the first place. He's meddling with time, and there was another one of him. One that ultimately made Cell think that he'd never see Trunks again. Back in his time, Trunks is dead, and that's how he's here today. Because Trunks had to pull that little stop with the time machine. And he wasn't going to let his efforts of getting his perfect form dwindle because of his timeline's Trunks. So he came here. But he wasn't expecting all of these exceedingly strong powers. And honestly, he should have waited to gather more life energy. But once he saw that they were all heading to Gero's lab, he couldn't pass up the ultimate opportunity to get the androids for himself. So in case you're wondering, this perfect cell has not absorbed nearly the amount of humans that he did in canon. So this cell is much weaker in his perfect state. So, yeah, but, obviously everybody doesn't know that. They just feel his power with all these powers coming out of him and everything and assume he's like this big, unstoppable creature, So, Cell smirks and says now that he's thanked them all, now he wishes to see what they've got. Trunks emerges from the wasteland, powers back up to grade 2, and he rushes straight towards Cell. But Frieza blasts him down, and Trunks is down on the ground at this point, angry that Frieza did this, thinking that Frieza's turned back to his roots, since he hasn't talked to him since he came back, and he's about to attack him now. But Goku just turns to 2, Super Saiyan 2, uses a key shockwave from his arm, and he knocks Trunks out. And the reason they did this was because they both knew that Trunks was no match for this Cell creature. But this actually worries and surprises Cell. Because not only does he not know who Frieza is, because remember, Frieza did not show up to Earth in time for the drones to calculate. Yes, I know. The drones more or less calculated Frieza and King Cold and Trunks and everything, and that's how Cell got that DNA. But because of the extended fight with King Cold, the drones wouldn't have been there by the time that Frieza, Goku, and Vegeta came back to Earth. So in this iteration, Cell has no idea about the likes of Frieza or his father, or probably even Trunks for that matter. So he does know, on the other hand, about Trunks in his time. So while not knowing as much about Trunks, most likely, he does know at least a little bit of him, enough to know he stopped him from getting 17 and 18 in his era. But that's where the time discrepancies and confusion boil down to the fact that in Trunks' time, Frieza essentially betrayed Goku before actually them both fully getting on the ship. So that's where the time discrepancies almost come into a play here of confusing parts of the story. But hey, it's time travel. So not only does Cell have no idea who Frieza is, and he was strong enough to blast this Trunks down, and showed even more power beyond that, from what Cell could sense, but that Goku demonstrated a power in that one key shockwave with the lightning and all that beyond Super Saiyan, that it honestly scares Cell a little. But if there's anything that we know about Cell, is that he's not going to back down from a challenge. He didn't against Teen Gohan, and he's certainly not going to here, especially since he's in his perfect form. Frieza introduces himself, feeling ultimate superiority over this creature, and introduces himself as the former Lord Emperor Frieza, who was once the emperor of this universe, now just simply an executioner to anything evil, which used to be himself. And this bug creature is not beyond that. Cell just smirks and laughs at this and says that he doesn't care whether this Frieza, as he proclaims himself to be an emperor, thinks that he's strong enough to take out Cell in his perfect state. He's going to prove to him that while he might not know who he is, Frieza will soon know what he is. The ultimate and then he's interrupted right then and there when Frieza, not even trying, and since Cell is, again, weaker in this time, especially without Frieza and King Cold's data, Frieza just uses a Fisher Slash, or a Death Wave if you really want to be technical on some of the names, and it cuts Cell instantly in half. It literally disintegrates the top half of him and almost takes out the entire bottom edge of him, while still having at least his legs and maybe just a tiny bit near his torso, So maybe a bit of his tail would be showing. Point is, he gets up, regenerates from this, and everybody's surprised, but now know that he's nothing. Cell powers up instantly, and he is furious because he didn't expect his perfect form to be completely outmatched in a simple attack. And add to that, it didn't even seem like this Frieza was even trying. He just literally stuck his fingers above his head, slashed, and that was it. He almost just died. And Cell was lucky enough to regenerate, but considering he's weaker here, no Frieza and King Cold data, which ampled his space and, knowledge and durability and stuff like that, that means that this actually hurt him a lot. He's really injured right now, but he powers up to his full power instantly, and he goes for a special beam cannon. But Frieza instantly shuts that down with a death beam, which pierces straight through Cell's head. And he drops to the ground, and this kills Cell. Now, I know what you guys are probably thinking, those of you who don't know basically Cell's DNA and stuff like that. I'll explain real quick. So, we know that Cell Max was able to be killed because of his head. That was literally the only way to stop him, was piercing him through the head. I mean, unless you were literally strong enough to erase him, being Beerus or something like that. Point is, that was enough to stop that Cell. But this Cell was completely different. Because remember, even though he was able to regenerate when his arm got literally blown off by Vegeta's Final Flash, he was able to regenerate that. And he regenerated his tail, and so on. But then Goku shows up with the Warp Kamehameha and literally takes the top half of Cell off. And Cell regenerates. And then he regenerates from Gohan's Kamehameha and then blowing himself up from literally a single cell. So this Cell, not the Cell Max, but this Cell, the original, the OG Cell, even though Piccolo has really never been able to be shown regenerating from, that, I think it is more or less down to Cell having everybody's data, which amplifies Piccolo's regeneration technique. Because, yes, we never saw Piccolo's head intact when he was hit from Trunks, knocking him to the ground when he was in stone. So there's theory that Piccolo could regenerate even if his head was destroyed. But I think that because of Cell here having everybody's DNA, this would amplify Piccolo's technique, enabling him to regenerate beyond a single, his head being destroyed and whatnot. Being able to regenerate from a hand or a leg or some part of his body that would consist of a cell strong enough to regenerate and empower his body, and especially getting him stronger, which is how Super Perfect Cell was a thing. So, because his head was destroyed here, this is a much weaker Cell, this is a much weaker and less durable Cell, and that he almost literally died from a single fissure slash, this shot to the head would actually work in killing Cell. Because when you think about it, hitting anyone in the brain like King Cold, who had no regeneration, would kill anybody. It's like a gunshot, So, all in all, this means that Cell is dead. And even if he didn't kill him here, Cell would not get any time to shine here unless he literally blew himself up or absorbed one of the Z fighters or an extra android. But that wouldn't have added almost anything unless I brought him out into space with Cooler, and I have way too much planned with Cooler to make Cell a side piece. So, all in all, that's what we got here. Cell is dead. So Trunks, he gets up and realizes how much of a fool he was for not expecting or knowing how this timeline would play out, and that Cell was literally here because of him. And the fact that he was very wrong about how Frieza honestly changed. In his time, he knew he was a bad guy, He was brought back as Mecha Frieza, and that all happened. He doesn't know that Frieza secretly almost wasn't, because he betrayed Goku and so on and so forth. But, that's all in the past, literally. And Frieza just smirks, saying, "Don't let it happen again." So they get into the lab, they see that it's true. 17 and 18 were dropped out of their pods. Like, the pods were taken out and they were absorbed, and Cell did that. So they look around the lab, making sure that there are no androids, no Jiro, nothing. And once they check all of the lab, they're destroying it. And sure enough, they find Android 16. And they kill him. There's no reason to keep 16 alive here. I have before, I will continue to have him in stories. This story, there's no purpose for 16. Literally none. Then they find the underground bunker. And yes, there's no presence Cell here. I believe in one of my stories, I might have included present Cell. But honestly, there's no point in having him here. Absolutely none. And meanwhile, at Capsule Corp, Vegeta is in the main part of Capsule Corp because the sensu beans stabilized him, but he's under surgical and medical treatment because the sensu beans could not regrow arms. So, that's a thing. And Trunks cannot bear to see his father like this, because it's not just one arm he had to deal with Gohan losing. This time, I know that was a bit weird. This time, in this timeline, more specifically, Vegeta is without both arms. And it's not Gohan, it's Vegeta, his father. But, luckily, Bulma and everybody else, Dr. Briefs, all that, and the fact that they were in Jiro's lab, gave them an idea on how to bring Vegeta back into fighting shape. They managed to craft and generate for Vegeta 2 mechanical, sentient-like, and really durable and weaponized sort of arms. So, we get Vegeta with cybernetic arms. And this, I bet you guys are wondering, for those of you who've seen What If Goku Won the 21st Budokai, or What If He Beat Jackie Chan by Masako X, Vegeta got like that in that story, right? Which then wasn't really touched upon in some pictures, and was literally the final boss of that story. Well, while I did take inspiration from that kind of, you gotta remember, if you saw that, this is way different. Vegeta lost his arms completely differently, and 19 didn't blow himself up like in that story. And Vegeta still has his legs, he just lost his arms. And the fact that the storyline for this is completely different. So all in all, it's just a slight reference, but way different storyline and means behind the cybernetics. So Trunks sees that now that he's had access to this grade 2, he wants to try to perfect it a little bit before he goes back to his time and even train with Goku and Frieza and Vegeta's new cybernetic enhancements, because he wants to be sure that in his time he can stop 17 and 18 and the cell that will arrive there. Goku is perfectly down for it. Frieza smirks, knowing that Trunks will actually get his chance to fight him, but he knows that Trunks is no kind of match for him now. So Frieza's not worried about Trunks anymore. And Vegeta, although I feel he might get involved, his cybernetic enhancements might weigh him down to the fact that he's not fully, Saiyan anymore. Once Trunks has actually gotten past grade 2 and gotten near the power I feel he would have in canon with no time chamber, because there'd be no reason to bring that in, then he goes back to his time. 17 and 18 are wiped out, and even though it takes a good amount of time, since all of this is being solved way sooner, he finds Cell and he takes him out. 3 weeks later, at Capsule Corps, Vegeta is very surprised to get a visitor at his front door. It's Frieza. And he says to Vegeta he has something he wants to ask of him and something he wishes to do for the prince. Something he should have done a long time ago, but never had the chance because of everything that happened. Something he never thought he'd do, something he never expected anyone of his race to do, and something he's honestly new to this whole doing things for other people thing. He tells Vegeta that he wants to bring back the Saiyans that he killed. The entire Saiyan race. And this utterly shocks Vegeta. How will Vegeta fully react to this? Will he want Frieza to do this? And if he does, how will the Saiyans fit into the story? And is this some kind of, plot with Vegeta this week to re-spark Frieza's revenge? What about Cooler? And what about the Buu Saga and future things into the story? All in all, what's gearing up for the rest of Frieza's redemption, or is this the start of the end of it? Find out in Part 7.